In this video we're going to take a look at brute forcing login credentials on a variety of tools. So we're using the Metasploitable 3 setup from previous videos. Here's the Ubuntu system and here's the Windows system. So both of these have a lot of vulnerable services running, and you can see that we've got the nmap scan results, which is run using the aggressive mode, which will run with quite a lot of options to give us a pretty detailed scan on both systems, and then we're exporting the scans so that we can import them into tools later on. So you can import scans into Metasploit and other tools to make life easier. So here's the results. Let's go and have a quick look at the scan results that we have here as well. You can see we've got a greppable format, we've got the standard nmap format that we see in the command line, and then we have an XML format as well. So one of the tools that we'll be looking at later will be able to import this in to run some brute force scans. So we'll check that out. There are a lot of tools available for brute forcing credentials, so I won't necessarily cover them all in this video, and because this is a 3-part series where we looked at brute forcing files and directories in the last video, and we'll be looking at general fuzzing tools in the next video, some of the tools I won't cover in great detail, so if you're wondering why, it might just be to try and ensure I'm not getting too repetitive between the 3 videos. Apart from that, I won't be looking at any hash cracking tools because I'll save those for a future video as well. You need to make sure you have some word lists available as well, so I'll leave some links in the description, but even if you just check out the Hack Tricks cheat sheet for brute forcing, there's some lists of default credentials here, some help for using tools to generate your own dictionaries. So for example, in some capture the flag competitions you might have a scenario where you find out that one of the users' favorite films is Star Wars, and then you could go to like the Star Wars fan fiction wiki or whatever and use cool to just generate a word list, and you can use some flags to, you know, create some permutations of that and then use that for brute forcing. So those tools will help you do that. I'll save those for a future video, but you can get some ready-made word lists as well. So word lists, for example, CrackStation, which gives you a really large comprehensive list of real passwords which can be used, and you should have some available as well. Let me just actually see what I have by default. If I go and list user share word lists, so you'll have RockU probably if you're using Kali or Parrot, and some of these I've already downloaded. Have I Imponed, CrackStation. You can see that some tools come with their own folders containing word lists, and you also have SecLists as well, which is a very popular list of word lists, and not just for passwords but for general fuzzing, indicators of compromise, etc. So you can, if you're using Kali, you can sudo apt-get install that. If you're not, you can just download the git, which I think I have in the home directory here. SecLists, so you can see we've got all our different folders here, and we could go and have a look, for example, at passwords. I would normally maybe just try something like the probable top 1575 passwords to begin with, especially if you're testing a range of usernames or testing on a range of targets. And apart from that, this cheat sheet here will also give you some commands for different tools. So just if you're in a CTF or you're doing something, you're in a hurry and you want to just very quickly get some example commands for different tools or different protocols to test out, it's good to have access to some cheat sheets to do that. I must say I do like Hack Tricks because they have a cheat sheet for pretty much everything. So once you kind of know the layout of the website and how the examples are laid out, it can be quite quick to go and pull up the information you need. So we're going to start by looking at brute forcing the most popular service, which would be HTTP. You can see here on the right we can just go to HTTP and have a look at the options. We've got wfuzz as a generic brute, but we've also got Hydra, Medusa, CMS map, and there are plenty of other tools we can use as well. wfuzz is a tool which I would have typically used just because it's good for doing other HTTP based fuzzing. As we can see here, we're going to have a look at this and ffuf in quite a lot more detail in the next video, so I don't want to cover it too much here. And in fact, as far as I'm aware, ffuf does all the same things that wfuzz does, but might be faster. We're going to find that out in the next video, but for now let's just assume that they both have a very similar syntax, very similar options that can be used. So in this case we'll use ffuf, and we'll try to brute force a HTTP service. If we go back to our nmap scan, Metasploit 3 probably wasn't actually the best example to use for brute forcing HTTP login credentials, and we'll see why here. So although there are a few HTTP services running, there are some issues in trying to brute force some of them. So let's take a look first of all at phpMyAdmin. So if we go to 10.10.10.6 phpMyAdmin, and we'll see we have a login form here. The reason this is an issue, if we Google phpMyAdmin brute force and take a quick look at a script which is set up to brute force phpMyAdmin, there are some extra protections in here. Basically, it's not just a case of enumerating the username and password list and replacing each one. We have to grab tokens and deal with different formats and things like that. So although we're not going to get this working here, we can have a look and see how we would approach a login field like this. So if we want to put together an ffuf command, in fact let's go and open up ffuf-h and have a look at some of the options here. So we can provide headers with a capital H flag, and this is the format, so separated name value separated by a colon, and then we can also do the same with cookie data, except we separate them with an equals. We can use -d for our post data, so that's probably where our username and our password is going to be. -x is going to be our method, so post or get, whatever. And we'll talk through some of these other options when we get to them. Our word list is -w, as you can see here, although you can specify multiple word lists. So if we wanted to do our username and our password, we would specify our word list first of all and have capital, say, user at the end, and then our second word list would have, say, capital pass at the end, and then we would replace whatever our username parameter is in the URL or in the post data with the user in capital letters, and then the same with the password. Hopefully that makes sense. We're just going to try and brute force passwords here, so we don't need to specify that. We'll just be able to use the fuzz because there's only one word list, so that's the only keyword we'll need. So I'm going to do ffuf-w, we'll go seclists, passwords, probable top 1575, and let's see what data we need to provide. So we have -d is our post data. So if we go and we could open up Burp Suite here and intercept the request. If you want to save a bit of time, you can just hit F12 to open up the developer tools on Chrome or Firefox, and then if we try to log in and have a look at the network tab, we'll actually see the login request. So it's this post request right here, and it came back with a 302 found, so that's a redirect. And we can see our response headers, our request headers. We can have a look at the cookies, at the request and the response here. So our request actually has our form data, which is our post data. So we can hit raw to make it easy to copy and paste. And then I'm just going to go and specify here -d. We'll paste that in, and we'll go and set the password to fuzz. So every request is going to replace this fuzz keyword with a different word from this word list of 1575 passwords. So that's that done. We might want to specify some other things. So we know this is a post request. Let's do capital X post. We might want to specify some headers. So we know that we can specify those separated by a colon. Let's go and have a look at our request headers right here. You can see we can make these raw as well to copy and paste it. So we might need to specify a variety of these depending on the site. In this case, I'm just going to grab this content type just to give as an example, if it lets me select it. So we'll grab that, we'll paste that in there, but you could provide more than that as well. We could say we want to provide our cookie, which was -b lowercase, and then that was separated by an equals. So let's go and see what cookies we've got. We've got our request cookies right here. There's no option to set that as raw, so I'm going to go and do that manually. We'll say phpMyAdmin is equal, and then we paste that in there. And what else do we want to provide? So we need to provide our URL. That's one important thing. So we'll grab the URL here. We can just give it the index because our token, well, we would need to grab our token, and there are some other methods to do this, but let's just grab the URL for now. And if we hit enter, start running through that, you see we're coming back with this 302 size 0. So this is another thing to mention is In some cases, you might just be looking for a 200 response. So whenever you fail to log in, you get like unauthorized, like 401 error. But whenever you put in the right username and password, you get a 200 response. So that's the normal way to check for a correct login. In this case, it looks like you're going to get a 302 no matter whether the credentials are correct or not. In which case you need to filter based on something else. So even if they always provide the same response code, they might have a different size of the content, so the page size might be different, or the content on the page might be different. So we might want to say that we don't want to look at any requests that contain this string, cannot log in, or we might want to say we only want to look at requests which contain the string successfully logged in, or we could do the same things based on the size of the page. So if we go and have a look at our help options again, that's basically matcher and filter options. So we can say that, for example, -fc, we want to filter out any 302 responses, so any response codes that are 302, we don't want to see them. Or we could say in our match regex, we only want to see responses that have successfully logged in them. So if we were to run that again and do -mc successful, okay, that was meant to be mr for regex. I used mc for the response code. So mr, and this isn't going to come back with anything because we're not going to get a successful login here. As I say, there are other things we need to do in terms of dealing with tokens and things like that. But just to give an example of how we could run ffuf. Now, I did try this previously with another service as well. If we have a look at the Drupal service here, let's change this to Drupal. And we have a login form here as well, so let's open this back up. Admin, login. Okay, so you can see here, too many failed login attempts from your IP address, it's temporarily blocked. So I did already try to brute force this. Again, we would go through this in a similar way. We can have a look at our requests and see what our form data is, and we can just go and replace the fields that we need to in the scan. But yeah, Metasploit 3 wasn't the best example for this. I did do a brute forcing video for the DVWA series, so if you check that on my channel, we do use wfuzz and I think ffuf as well in there to successfully brute force the HTTP login. But just so long as you know how to use it, what the options are, and how to get your way around the tool, we'll be covering this in a lot more detail in the next video anyway. So let's move on and take a look at a different tool. Hydra is another very popular tool for brute forcing login credentials, and unlike the previous ones that we looked at, it doesn't just focus on HTTP logins. So you can see here a list of different protocols which are supported. We can see some instructions on how to build this, although if you have Kali or Parrot, you've probably got this installed already. And here's the general syntax. We run Hydra, pass in some options, we can give it the port if we like, the target, and then the protocol. Some options, for example, might include our word list that we'll need to provide. You can see here some general examples. Let's go and have a look in the command line and see if we run Hydra. We also get these same options up. So if we were looking to brute force a HTTP service like we were just previously looking at, we could use Hydra. You can see here at the bottom the example. So Hydra-L, we could say we want to specify our username as admin and keep it as admin. Or we could provide -L and then a word list of usernames if we want. In this case, I'm just going to say admin, and then we'll say our password is P for a password list. But if we did lowercase, it would just be a single password we could specify. So P, and then let's just say pass list. I'm not going to specify it here. And then we could specify our protocols, so whether it's HTTP post or HTTP get. So let's first of all say that IP 10.10.10.6, and then we could do HTTP-post-form, and then the way we would specify this here is the page. So we've already specified the IP, but perhaps we need to go to login.php, and then separated by a colon we can provide our post data. So for example, username equals, and then we'll say user, which is going to grab the user that we specified right here. In this case, it's always going to grab admin, but we always need to provide the user and the pass anyway. And then we can say our pass is equal to pass, so this is just a placeholder which is going to be replaced based on our password list, and then the next colon we provide will be able to give a message. So we could say here login failed, and that's the message that we want to ensure doesn't show up. So you can either use a fail message or a success message, but by default it will use the fail message. So that's generally how we would brute force a HTTP service, and as I say, if you go back to the DVWA video, I did just that with Hydra, although there was a bug with Hydra at the time, which if you have a look through the Git you can see was fixed very shortly after I made that video. So if you saw that, you might know what I'm talking about. We have a list of our protocols here as well. So we've already tested out HTTP. We know that Metasploitable 3 is not a great system to test out brute force in HTTP login credentials, so let's try another service. If we go back to our nmap scan, we've got FTP, we've got SSH. Why don't we try FTP first of all on the 10.10.10.5 system. So we'll do Hydra dash, I'm going to do dash L capital, and I'm going to say seclists, usernames, and we'll do top username shortlist, and then I'm going to say capital P for our password list. Again, seclists, passwords, probable top 1575, and then we'll want to say, in this case we're going to do FTP, so we'll do FTP 10.10.10.5, and if we start running that, you can see there are some other options we might want to provide. So for example, the number of threads, number of tasks that are running, and depending whether there's firewalls and stuff in place, you might want to slow things down, or you'll notice that we don't actually see too much activity here, so you can cancel this. You can see that that generated a restore session, so we can just restore it, resume that using capital R. I'm going to specify here dash capital V to make it verbose, so we can actually see each login attempt. And if we try to run that, you'll see here it makes us wait for the restore file. So I'm going to cancel that, I'm going to go back, I'm going to do dash capital I as well to ignore that, and then we'll be able to actually watch it going through just to make sure it's not doing anything, or to make sure it is doing something, should I say. So we can leave that to run through. Again, we can try this for some other protocols as well. We'll do Hydra-L routes, and then -P, grab our seclists, passwords, probable top 1575, and then we'll try and do SSH. So SSH 10.10.10.6. I'm actually going to cancel the FTP scan. We should have really set that on verbose as well. Do verbose and ignore, and we'll see that running through. So different services will run at different speeds by default. You can see that the FTP scanner ran a lot quicker than the SSH scanner, but there's quite a lot of different protocols, so worth checking this out whenever you run into hack the box machines or vulnhub and stuff, and there's a variety of different services running. Hydra does also have a graphical user interface as well, if you'd prefer to use that. Let's take a look at another tool anyway, which is ncrack. So this is produced by Nmap, and you can see here it's a high-speed network authentication cracking tool, and it deals with a lot of other protocols as well. So not just HTTP and HTTPS, we can also do SSH, RDP, FTP, Telnet, etc. So you can access the documentation here through the man page, but it's essentially the same information that you're going to get from running man ncrack in the terminal. So you can go there, get the full documentation, or if you just type ncrack, that'll give you the kind of a summary of the key options that you can provide. And you'll see that a lot of these are quite similar to Nmap in terms of the syntax. So if you go back to the Nmap video I did, we went through all the different categories like output and inputs and things like that. So some of that might help. We have some examples here at the bottom as well, so we might want to just try an example. Let's do ncrack-v --user root, and we'll look for the SSH password on the 10.5 box. So 22, and presumably this is going to use a default word list. So if we have a look at user share word lists nmap, I'm presuming it's going to use this list as the password list by default if we don't specify anything else. If we have a look at the options here as well, we can specify our file name here for our usernames and our passwords with capital U and capital P, or we can presumably just pass in a single username or password. We can also pass in scan results, so -ix, let's go, we do have some scan results, so let's go into scans, and in here we have our scan.xml. So if we use -x, we should be able, -ix, we should be able to run this ncrack-v -ix scan.xml. Service with name, okay, not supported, not supported, okay. Alright, so that didn't work. Maybe if it doesn't have any, maybe it's only taken specific service names here, maybe we need some more kind of service detection. Not too sure, I haven't actually used that before, so let's go back here anyway. We can see that that's finished. It didn't find the result. Presumably if we tried with a better word list it would have some more luck there. But just wanted to have a quick look at this anyway. This isn't a tool I would typically use for brute forcing, but we can see that it does have a lot of powerful options by the looks of it. The next tool we're going to look at is brutespray. So I have the GitHub open here. We can see that it's a tool which will take in nmap results and brute force the services automatically. So we can use sudo apt-get install to install this. Let's see if I have it installed already. Yep, we've already got it installed. And otherwise you can install it from the GitHub and install your requirements and stuff like that, and then we can see the commands here to run it. So we can run brutespray and then pass in as a file our scan results, and then we've got some more options here with some more detailed options, so limiting the threads and the hosts and stuff like that to avoid being throttled or having the IP blacklisted or something like that. So we can go and test this out. I think this uses Medusa, which is another credential cracking tool which I haven't shown yet. And yeah, we can see that it uses Medusa. So let's go and try this out with in our scan directory. Brutespray -h for our options, so we can pass in our file here as scan.xml, and you can see by default it's going to go to brutespray output. It's trying a variety of different usernames and passwords on the different services. You can see here it's running through FTP, SSH, and it's alternating between them, which is actually, that's really handy, because as you noted earlier when we were going through the FTP and SSH brute forcing, it was a lot quicker to brute force the FTP. So if you're quite limited in the amount of requests that you can send each service, then alternating between each of them is a great idea. I'm not too sure how it works in terms of multiple hosts here as well. It looks like, yeah, it's alternating between the hosts as well. So presumably if you had, say, 100 hosts and you wanted to brute force SSH on all of them, it would send the maximum number of allowed requests on the first host and then do the same on the next host, and do that until it gets back round to the beginning again, which is the optimal way of brute forcing for sure. So as that's running through, let's just go and have a look at another service that we could use to do some brute forcing, which is good old metasploit. So we can open up the MSF console. And once this boots up, we can have a look at the help menu if we want to. We can search for different things. So if you just type in search without any options, it'll give us some possibilities here. I'm going to search for brute, and if we search for brute, you can see that it's a little bit hard to see there at the moment. Let me change this down to 14. So yeah, we can brute force logins for some different web services. Again, DNS brute force. We have brute force directories on HTTP. A lot of these are HTTP based. We can see here we have FTP as well though. If we were to search for SSH, we should be able to find, it's probably an auxiliary module. We can enumerate users. Here we go, login, default SSH, etc. So there's a lot of tools in Metasploit to go and do some of this brute forcing. I'll not run through demonstrating there any at the moment, but just wanted to mention that. Our bruting has completed here as well. So you can see we've got this brute spray output. Let's have a look and see what it's got. And we got SSH success. So let's take a look. SSH account found. So it found SSH vagrant and password is vagrant on the Windows system, which is indeed correct. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. We've run through quite a few different tools that can be used to brute force credentials, and we successfully managed to brute force one login credential, which is vagrant. Any questions or comments? Leave them down below. Thanks.